Have you ever looked in the mirror and realized you no longer recognize the person staring back at you? I have. For 10 years, I believed that loving my husband meant sacrificing a little more of myself every single day. I thought compromise was the secret to a happy marriage. I thought if I loved him enough, supported him enough, and stayed patient enough, things would get better. Instead, I slowly disappeared. People often ask me why I left. They imagine there must have been one terrible night, one unforgettable fight, one moment that changed everything. But the truth is far quieter than that. I didn't leave because of one bad day. I left because of 10,000 small ones. This is my story. There was a time when I laughed without worrying if I was being too loud. I dreamed of becoming an interior designer. My sketchbooks were filled with colorful homes, cozy cafes, and beautiful spaces that I hoped one day would become real. I believed the future was full of possibilities. Then I met Daniel. He was charming, confident, and kind, or at least that's who I believed he was. He remembered little things about me, surprised me with flowers, and made me feel like I was the only woman in the world. When he asked me to marry him, I didn't hesitate. I thought I was saying yes to my forever. I had no idea I was slowly saying goodbye to myself. The first year of our marriage felt almost perfect. Then the little changes began. One evening, as I was getting ready to meet my best friend for dinner, Daniel looked at my dress and smiled. "You're really going to wear that?" I looked down at the blue dress I loved. "What's wrong with it? I just think married women should dress a little more." Respectfully, he said it so gently that I didn't argue. I changed my clothes. It seemed like such a small thing. I told myself he was just looking out for me. A few weeks later, he didn't want me spending so much time with my friends. "They don't understand marriage," he said. "They're filling your head with nonsense." So I saw them less. Then he started questioning every phone call, every shopping trip, every decision, not with anger, with doubt. "Are you sure that's the best choice? Do you really need that? Why didn't you ask me first?" Little by little, I stopped making decisions on my own. It wasn't because he forced me. It was because I became afraid of disappointing him. One morning, I accidentally put sugar in his coffee, just one spoon. He took a sip, walked to the sink, and poured the entire mug down the drain. Then he placed the empty cup in front of me. "You know I don't take sugar." "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I'll make another one." He looked at his watch. "Now I'm late." He walked out without eating breakfast. The silence he left behind hurt more than any argument. I stood alone in the kitchen, staring at the breakfast I had spent an hour preparing. Then I poured my own coffee into the sink. I wasn't hungry anymore. That became my life. I measured every word before I spoke. I apologized for mistakes that didn't matter. I smiled even when my heart was breaking. The strange thing about control is that it doesn't always arrive with shouting. Sometimes it arrives with a smile. Sometimes it sounds like concern. Sometimes it convinces you that you're the problem. And by the time you realize what's happening, you've forgotten who you were before it all began. One rainy afternoon, while cleaning the attic, I found an old cardboard box. Inside were my college sketchbooks. I carefully turned each page. Every drawing reminded me of the young woman who believed she could build beautiful places. I smiled through tears. Then I heard Daniel's footsteps behind me. "What are those?" "My old designs," I said proudly. He flipped through the pages for a few seconds before tossing them into a garbage bag. "You don't need these anymore." My heart dropped. "Daniel, those mean everything to me. They're just childish drawings. They were my dream." He shrugged. "Dreams don't pay the bills." He carried the bag toward the garage. I wanted to run after him. Instead, I stood there, completely frozen. It wasn't just paper he had thrown away. It felt like he had thrown away the last piece of the woman I used to be. That night, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror. The woman staring back at me looked exhausted. There were dark circles beneath my eyes. The sparkle that once filled them was gone. I touched the mirror and whispered the words that changed my life forever. "Who am I?" For the first time in 10 years, I didn't wonder if my husband still loved me. I wondered if I still loved myself. And deep inside, a quiet voice whispered something I had been too afraid to hear. "You deserve to exist as more than someone else's shadow." I wish I could tell you there was one unforgettable moment that made me leave. There wasn't. No shattered glass. No screaming that the neighbors could hear. No dramatic scene like the ones you see in movies. The truth is, the worst prisons are often the quiet ones. After that night in front of the mirror, something inside me had changed. Outwardly, my life looked exactly the same. I still woke up before sunrise. I still made Daniel's breakfast. I still folded his shirts exactly the way he liked. I still smiled whenever someone asked, "How's married life?" And I still lied, "It's wonderful." Every lie felt heavier than the last. Until one afternoon, my phone rang. It was my younger sister. "Mom's birthday is this Saturday," she said excitedly. "You have to come this year." I closed my eyes. I couldn't remember the last family dinner I had attended. "I'll be there," I promised, and for the first time in years, I actually meant it. That evening, while Daniel was eating dinner, I mentioned it. "My mom's birthday is this weekend. I'd like to spend a few hours with my family." He didn't even look up from his plate. "No," I waited for him to explain. He never did. "I already told them I'd come." "Then tell them you changed your mind. It's just dinner." "So?" I looked at him in disbelief. "I haven't seen them in months. You have a husband now. I also have parents." He finally looked at me. His eyes were calm, almost emotionless. "You always become difficult after talking to your family. They just miss me. They're trying to turn you against me." I felt something I hadn't felt in a very long time. Anger, not loud anger. Quiet anger, the kind that grows after years of swallowing every emotion. "I'm going," I said softly. He smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It was the smile of someone who believed he had already won. "No, you're not." The room fell silent. For years that silence had frightened me. This time, it strengthened me. Saturday arrived. I picked out a simple blue dress. The same one he had once told me never to wear again. As I reached for my purse, Daniel stood in the doorway. "Where do you think you're going?" "To my parents' house." "I told you no." Something inside me refused to shrink this time. "I'm not asking for permission." His face hardened. "I pay for this house. I pay the bills. I've given you everything." I looked around the beautiful living room, the expensive furniture, the spotless floors, the elegant decorations. Then I looked back at him. "You gave me a house, but you never gave me peace." His expression changed. For the first time, he realized I wasn't afraid. "You'll regret walking out that door." Maybe he expected me to cry, to apologize, to unpack everything I hadn't even packed yet. Instead, I walked past him. He grabbed my wrist. Not hard enough to leave a bruise, just hard enough to remind me that he still believed I belonged to him. I slowly looked down at his hand, then back into his eyes. "Let go." He didn't move. I repeated myself, "Let go." After a few long seconds, he released my wrist. That tiny moment told me everything I needed to know. This marriage wasn't built on love anymore. It was built on control. I walked out the front door. The fresh air hit my face. For a second I froze. I had nowhere to go except my parents' house. No perfect plan, no certainty. Just one suitcase in the trunk of my car, and a heart that refused to stay trapped any longer. When I arrived, my mother opened the door. She looked at my suitcase, then at my face. She didn't ask a single question. She simply wrapped her arms around me. The moment she hugged me, I broke. Years of pretending, years of silence. Years of convincing myself that I was the problem came pouring out in tears. Between sobs, I whispered, "I'm sorry." She gently stroked my hair. "For what?" "For disappearing." She pulled back just enough to look into my eyes. "You didn't disappear. You just forgot how valuable you are." Those words healed a part of me that I thought was gone forever. That night, I slept in my childhood bedroom. The walls were the same color I had painted as a teenager. My old books were still on the shelf. My graduation photo still hung above the desk. For the first time in years, I slept without fear. The next morning, my phone was flooded with messages from Daniel. At first, he apologized. Then he blamed me. Then he begged. Then he threatened. Each message reminded me why I had left. I didn't reply. Instead, I blocked his number. Not because I hated him, but because I finally loved myself enough to protect my peace. As I looked out the bedroom window at the rising sun, I realized something. Leaving my husband hadn't been the hardest part. The hardest part had been believing I deserved to leave. And now that I finally believed it, there was no going back. People think that once you leave, the pain is over. It isn't. Walking away is only the beginning. The hardest part comes afterward. When you have to rebuild a life you no longer recognize. The first few weeks were terrifying. I questioned every decision I made. Some mornings, I woke up convinced I had made a terrible mistake. Then I would remember the silence in that house. The fear of saying the wrong thing. The the constant feeling that no matter how hard I tried, I would never be enough. And suddenly, leaving didn't feel like a mistake anymore. It felt like survival. A month later, I found a tiny apartment across town. It wasn't beautiful. The paint on the walls was peeling. The kitchen was so small that only one person could stand inside it. The bedroom barely fit a bed, but when I unlocked that door for the first time, I smiled. Because every inch of that apartment belonged to me. No one could tell me what color to paint the walls. No one could tell me what music I could listen to. No one could tell me that my dreams were childish. For the first time in years, I felt free. A few days later, while unpacking my boxes, my mother walked in carrying something wrapped in an old blanket. "I think these belong to you," she said. When I opened it, I couldn't breathe. My sketchbooks, the same sketchbooks Daniel had thrown away. "I went back to your house the day after you left," my mother said softly. They were sitting beside the trash bin. I held them against my chest and cried, not because they were just drawings, but because they reminded me that the woman I used to be had never truly disappeared. She had simply been waiting for me to come back. That night, I opened the first sketchbook. On the very first page, I had written something when I was 20 years old. "One day, I want to design homes that make people feel safe." I stared at those words for a long time. Then I whispered, "Maybe it's not too late." The next morning, I updated my resume. I sent applications to every interior design company I could find. Days passed, then weeks, most never replied. Some rejected me. Every rejection made the old voice in my head return. "You're not good enough. You're too old to start over. You should have stayed." But this time, I knew that voice didn't belong to me. It belonged to years of being told I wasn't enough. So I kept going. 3 weeks later, my phone rang. A small design studio wanted to meet me. The owner looked through my portfolio without saying a word. Finally, he smiled. "These designs have heart. When can you start?" I almost laughed. Instead, I cried. Not because I had found a job, but because someone had looked at something I created and saw value in it. Little by little, life began to change. I painted my apartment. I filled it with plants. I framed my own artwork. I laughed with my family again. I met friends for coffee without asking anyone's permission. I started sleeping through the night. The woman who had once apologized for existing slowly began to stand a little taller. One afternoon, nearly a year after I left, I walked into a bookstore. As I searched the shelves, I noticed a young woman sitting in the corner. She was crying quietly. Our eyes met. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm just having a bad day." I sat beside her. "I used to say that too." She looked at me for a moment before asking, "How did you know when it was time to leave?" I thought about that question carefully. Then I answered honestly. I didn't leave because I stopped loving him. I left because I finally started loving myself. Tears filled her eyes. Mine did too. Before we left, she hugged me tightly. "Thank you," she whispered. In that moment, I realized my story no longer belonged only to me. If sharing it could help even one person find the courage to choose themselves, then every painful chapter had a purpose. Today, when I look in the mirror, I recognize the woman staring back at me. She isn't perfect. She still carries scars. Some days are harder than others. But she smiles because that smile belongs to her. Not to fear, not to control, not to someone else's approval. To her. If you're listening to my story while questioning your own worth, I want you to hear this. Love should never make you feel small. It should never ask you to silence your voice, abandon your dreams, or lose your identity. The right person will never require you to disappear so they can shine. The day I left my husband, people thought my life had fallen apart. The truth is, that was the day my life finally began. And if you're waiting for a sign to believe in yourself, maybe this story is it. Choose peace. Choose hope. Choose the life waiting on the other side of fear. Most importantly, choose yourself.